Welcome back, book talk enthusiasts, to another exciting episode of Dragons and Spaceships, where we shine a spotlight on all the sci-fi and fantasy books that are taking the platform by a storm. I'm your host, Brandy, and today we are discussing a modern fantasy novel that blends magic, gender politics, and fierce friendships, Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. But before we get into this book, as always, let's take a look at the Realm and Galactic rankings of trending books this week. This week, we have Somewhere Beyond the Sea by T.J. Klune, Archangels of Funk by Andrea Hairston, In the Belly of the Whale by Michael Flynn, and The Fatal Kiss by Alicia Jasinska. I hope I'm saying that right. And number 5, we have This World Is Not Yours by Kemi Ashing-Giwa. This one we will talk about more later in this episode. Okay, back to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. This book is the first book in this new fantasy series, and it's making waves for how it weaves together magic and contemporary issues like gender identity and power dynamics. And if you're a fan of urban fantasy with a dose of social commentary, you are going to want to stick around for this one. And just a heads up, there might be spoilers ahead. If you haven't read this book, feel free to hit pause, dive into the world of Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and then come back and join us for the conversation. So let's start by setting the scene. Her Majesty's Royal Coven, or HMRC for short, is a secret government organization created by Queen Elizabeth I to oversee the witch population and protect the UK from magical threats. Sounds like your classic magical organization, right? But Juno Dawson has done something fresh here by blending the fantastical with real-world politics and societal issues. At the heart of the story are 5 women: Helena, Neve, Leonie, Elle, and Theo. They were childhood friends who were all part of HMRC, but as the years have passed, their lives have taken very different directions. Now they're brought back together by a prophecy about an apocalyptic event that centers around a young warlock named Theo, who is also a trans woman. The characters' different responses to this prophecy and Theo's identity drive much of the conflict in this novel. Let's talk about the main characters, starting with Helena, the current head of the Majesty's Royal Coven. Helena is all about order, tradition, and protecting the world from magical threats. She's the character most tied to the status quo, but as the prophecy unfolds, Helena is forced to confront her own bias and rigidity of the Coven's ways. Helena is really interesting because she kind of represents like a feminism that is stuck in tradition. She's powerful, but her own view of power excludes those who don't fit the mold, like Theo. Neve, on the other hand, is the spiritual, more laid-back member of the group. She's distanced herself from the Coven and prefers a quieter life, but the return of the prophecy pulls her back in. She's the character that brings a softer touch, but don't let that fool you. She's not afraid to make tough decisions. And then there's Leonie. Leonie is one of my favorite characters because she's the rebel. She left the Coven to form her own, more inclusive group as one that embraces intersectionality and rejects the old exclusionary ways of doing things. Leonie's character is a nod to modern movements that challenge systemic oppression and fight for representation across lines of race, gender, and sexuality. She's a progressive force in the story, and her clashes with Helena over how the Coven should operate are some of the most compelling parts about the book. Elle, meanwhile, has distanced herself from the magic altogether. She's living the suburban dream, completely removed from the Coven's drama, at least until her friends pull her back in. Her character shows what happens when someone tries to reject their magical heritage, and the tension between her mundane life and her magical past is a great addition to the story. But now let's get into the most central and dynamic character, Theo. Theo is a young warlock whose very existence is tied to an apocalyptic prophecy. More importantly, Theo is a trans woman, and her journey through the story is filled with challenges that mirror real-world issues of gender identity and acceptance. Dawson does a brilliant job of using magic as a metaphor for the struggles transgender individuals face in the terms of finding acceptance in systems that were never built with them in mind. The way the Coven responds to Theo's identity is key to the book's exploration of inclusion versus exclusion. While some characters like Leonie accept and embrace Theo for who she is, others like Helena struggle with it. It's the tension that adds layers to the story, transforming it from just another magical conflict into something much more deeper and more resonant with today's social conversations. Theo's character allows Dawson to explore trans identity in a way that she feels organic to the fantasy world. The magic, the prophecy, and the Coven's hierarchy all tie into this overarching theme of who gets to wield the power and who is seen as a threat to it. It's a story about fighting for your place in a system that wasn't designed to include you, and that's what makes this novel so powerful. One of the things that makes Her Majesty's Royal Coven stand out is how Juno Dawson tackles modern-day politics within the framework of the fantasy novel. This book isn't just about witches and spells, it's about power structures, inclusion, and identity. The Coven, in many ways, is a stand-in for the institutions that we see in our own world that claim to be progressive but can still fall short when it comes to true equality. This novel challenges the idea that power must be exclusionary and asks us to rethink how we approach leadership, feminism, and allyship. But what does that mean to be a part of that community? Who gets to belong and who decides what's normal? These are the kind of questions that Dawson explores in this book, and she does so with wit, emotion, and a lot of magic. So, whether you're here for the magic, the sisterhood, or the deep dive into gender politics, Her Majesty's Royal Coven offers all of that and more. Juno Dawson has crafted a world where contemporary issues are woven into the fabric of fantasy, and the result is something truly special. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend picking it up, especially if you're a fan of urban fantasy that isn't afraid to tackle real-world issues. And once you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Helena's leadership? Were you rooting for Theo? And where do you think the story will go in the next series? Also, if you love this book, please don't forget to check out the rest of the trilogy, with the next book being The Shadow Cabinet and the third book being Queen Bee, which I am very excited about because I love Anne Boleyn, anything about Anne Boleyn, and I am very excited to keep reading this series and see how that all goes. Don't leave yet, though. Before we go, today we have our 2 other segments to go over. First, we have Dragon's Roar. In today's Dragon Roar, we're diving into the latest drama or news in the book industry. For all of the Solarian and Zodiac Academy lovers out there, we have some good news for you. The Twisted Sisters announced that Live and Let Lionel is coming to audio. And it's very exciting because it will be narrated by Bridget and Jake Bordeaux. That should be amazing to listen to, and I'm so excited to check it out. Next, we have the Sorcerer's Scrolls, where we look at some forthcoming fables and quests you can embark on soon. I mentioned earlier I was going to talk more about This World Is Not Yours by Kemi Ashwin-Giwa. This book sparked my interest, and it was just released this month, so I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about it. So this is what I could find about it. This dark sci-fi horror novella follows Amara, who escapes her violent family to join a colonization project on a new planet. However, things take a sinister turn when the planet's self-cleaning mechanism called the Grey awakens and begins consuming invasive organisms. The colonists must not only fight for survival, but also face the consequences of past betrayals. If you're into dark, atmospheric sci-fi with horror elements, this one is a must-read. That one definitely sparked my interest. So if you have read that, let us know, and let us know if you think we should talk about it on the podcast. Well, that's it for today's episode of Dragons and Spaceships. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the realms and starships. And thank you for joining me on this deep dive of Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. If you've read the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to find us on social media for more quick and engaging book reviews and recommendations. Until next time, happy reading, stay curious, and keep exploring the fantastical and futuristic. And may your TBR pile never stop growing.